Hello! We are Rachel and Michael Aubrey. We're linguists with SIL International. This two-part video series grows out of the SIL Biblical Language Grammar Project. You can learn about how we're writing grammar for Bible translation in the link below. Today, we investigate constructions and the source path goal schema. In this video, we cover part 1 of this presentation. Part 1 focuses on how we understand constructions in language through cognitive patterns that arise from our basic bodily experiences. We also cover the basic spatial construction and explore extensions of the basic construction into more abstract domains, like events involving changes of state and communication.
How do we relate spatial and abstract usage? With concrete nouns, it makes sense, from one physical noun to a different physical noun, as in Luke, do not move from house to house. But with abstract nouns, the metaphor from one abstract noun to a different abstract noun doesn't make much sense. Look at 2 Corinthians 2:16 and Romans 1:17. From death to death? Life to life? From faith to faith? This leads to two important questions. First, if the spatial usage makes sense, how do we make sense of the abstract usage? And second, can we find an analysis that motivates both the spatial and abstract meanings together? We think that cognitive linguistics provides a means of doing both. But before we can do the analysis, we need to understand two concepts: image schemas and constructions. Let's take these two ideas in turn.
Think about motion. Motion gets us from one place to another. And to get there, we follow a path and go in a direction. These are not criterial properties of motion itself, but they inform how we understand it and use it in language. This understanding is based on an image schema. What's an image schema? Image schemas are cognitive patterns that organize human knowledge about the world. Where do they come from? They arise from our bodily movements in space and time. And what are image schemas like? They're simple structures made up of related parts. We can easily manipulate them to fit a variety of contexts, and we use them to understand both concrete and abstract concepts via metaphorical mappings. The source path goal schema has constituent parts: a source, a path, goal, and a direction. Paths are part of basic human experience. Some paths involve physical surfaces, such as the path you walk to get to the bathroom when duty calls. Other paths are projected. An arrow shoots through the air to its target. Still other paths are imaginary, such as the force of attraction that propels you toward a fascinating person. All these paths have the source path goal schema as their basis. Real or imagined, all paths implicate the following parts: something that moves, animate or inanimate, a starting point source, and an endpoint goal. A path connects source and goal with a sequence of contiguous locations between them. Paths are not inherently directional in themselves, but as intentional agents in the world, we humans give them direction. As we move through space, we experience the passage of time. I start at the source at time 1 and move to the goal at time 2. A timeline is then mapped onto the path. I reach the goal at a later point than when I began. And finally, paths can be expanded, shrunk, or morphed and still connect 2 points.
Constructions are conventionalized learned pairings of form and meaning. They can be small, like the ing endings on verbs. They can be larger, like English transitivity. Consider Rachel laughed in 1. Most people would say that laugh is a simple intransitive verb, but because transitivity is expressed as a set of constructions, we can use the verb laugh in other ways. The transitive Rachel laughed herself onto the floor in 2 is meaningful and grammatical. The reflexive makes it possible to map this ostensibly intransitive verb onto the structure of the transitive caused motion construction. They are also motivated. Motivation is about why a given construction makes sense. Think about Rachel laughed herself onto the floor. The caused motion construction makes sense. It is motivated by human experiences of laughing so hard that one falls down. We also see the source path goal schema implicated, and the directionality of motion events from initiating source subject vertically down a path that ends on the floor, goal. These same motivations are in Rachel laughed milk out of her nose, embodied experiences of milk and noses and laughing and caused motion, and the SPG schema now profiling the source of the motion out of her nose rather than the goal. But both can be profiled as in 4, where milk follows a complete path from nose to table. Our focus is on how the source path goal schema motivates syntactic structures with multiple prepositional phrases, specifically the juxtaposition of 2 prepositional phrases in a clause that specify source and goal together. Not source or goal, but source and goal.
Prepositions are relational, and the syntax reflects this. One element is chosen as the primary focus, the trajector, modified by the prepositional phrases. The other elements in our SPG, source path goal construction, are the landmark source and the landmark goal. These landmarks serve as the reference point for locating the trajector in time and space. The landmarks are the object of the source preposition and the goal preposition in syntactic structure. Trajector and landmark are standard terms in cognitive linguistics. Here, Eleazar, as trajector, is the focused element in our perception and in the narrative. He is located in space, and he flies through the air. Where did he jump from, and where did he land? The landmark source and goal prepositional phrases specify the path of his flight from the ramparts into the valley. The path between 2 points is not specified for shape or orientation. In this example, the path is vertical. The trajector moves downward with the force of gravity. But in other examples that we'll see, the path can also be horizontal, tracing the trajector's motion from city to city.
The source path goal construction is a family of constructions. Our network has a central prototype, motivated by the source path goal schema. Related constructions are then realized as divergences from the prototype in specific ways via links. This is a basic network, and as we progress, we will see it fleshed out with more detail. Let's first talk about constructions that profile the endpoints, source and goal. The prototype exists in space. It is telic and bounded, and provides a syntactic template for mapping the source path goal image schema. Consider the elements of the schema. A movable Jesus as the trajector. Caiaphas is the starting point, and the governor's house is the end point. And the trajector, movable Jesus, travels the path between these points, and the path establishes a relationship between them. Both time and space are traversed in the motion between source and goal. The trajector ends up in a distinct location at the end than where it started at the source. It is telic. Because the schema specifies motion, but no other elements of verb meaning, the prototype is readily realized with both transitive, caused motion events and intransitive, self-propelled motion events, as we can see here. Tobit moves from the courtyard into his home. A man travels from Jerusalem to Jericho.
When we zoom in on part of our network of constructions that profile the endpoints of the SPG schema, other smaller constructions can come into focus. We can distinguish these by metaphors they rely on, metaphors for source or goal, and metaphors for event types. Abstract endpoints are possible via metaphors, such as 1. Causes are sources. Motion often relies on force, a causal chain with an impetus, a direction, and motion. Outside forces can propel a trajectory forward, transferring the trajectory to a new location. Sources construed as the cause are the force that propels the trajectory away from one location to another. In Jeremiah, he who flees from fear as the cause that propels him away will ultimately fall into the pit. And 2. Purposes are destinations. Some movements are movements toward a desired location, a destination. This desired location becomes the goal, or the purpose for our motion toward it. In Esdras B, God transferred bread from heaven, the source, toward the purpose of helping with the Israelites' famine, the goal. The SPG schema arises from our embodied experience in the world and provides the structured relationships for understanding more abstract domains of knowledge. The change of state SPG construction relies on two metaphors. One, change is motion, and two, states are locations. The landmarks are conceptually differentiated from each other. The trajector travels from one state to a different state. The source state and the goal state share a semantic frame, allowing them to be interpreted as points along a change path. The trajector's change is construed as motion, from source, darkness, to goal, light. The path is normally left implicit, but in the example from 1 Clement, the path is overtly expressed with dia. Christ is the path from darkness into light. This example illustrates how a highly abstract concept, like salvation, can be understood in terms of a basic schema from embodied experience.
Communication events rely on a metaphorical mapping. Communication is conceived in terms of physical motion. Words are objects that move from speaker to addressee. The source domain is the SPG schema, physical motion on a path from source location to goal location. The target domain is communication, usually with a fictive path. Speech comes from the speaker and travels to the addressee. In Acts 20, though, the message is likely traveling a physical path as well, via a messenger, from Miletus source to Ephesus goal. Josephus relies on a similar metaphor. Discourse topics are locations. Writing follows a fictive path from one topic to another. Josephus takes a different path to digress, and then he backtracks to where he digresses toward his next topic. The logic of the metaphorical entailments come from the inferences of the SPG schema, and Josephus's syntax reflects the semantic links in the schema.
This is the end of part 1. So far, we've covered some important theoretical concepts: image schemas, constructions, and also trajectors and landmarks. Additionally, we looked at the spatial prototype construction and saw how it extends metaphorically to motivate several additional constructions, such as changes of state and communication events. We described these as constructions that profile, that is, focus on the source and goal endpoints. Attention is on how the trajector starts at point A and ends at point B. In part 2, we shift our attention to the related constructions that profile the path between source and goal. Constructions that focus on or profile the path rather than the endpoints are primarily interested in what happens between the points, rather than whether or not the trajector leaves the source or arrives at the goal.